Good morning. Lots to catch up on with our friends, right? Welcome to First Church Unitarian of Littleton on this most beautiful spring/summer day. My name is Karen Tucker-Barisano, and I am the outgoing chair of the standing committee. I'd like to call your attention to just a few items in community matters. The details are in there should you need them. First of all, on June 11th, we have a double hitter. We have June 11th is the coming of age service for Oliver and Mayred. And we also have our Reverend Jackie Clement and Monica Pillman hosting a workshop, a worship workshop here in the sanctuary from 12 to 2, but also it will be on Zoom should you want to attend. To all parents, next Sunday will be our last religious education class for this current year. And as our church wraps up, we are starting to look at the summer, which we'll be doing our TED Talks. So if you have a favorite TED Talk and you would like to host one, please contact Cindy Malley about that. Our service today is entitled Widening the Circle, and we have two guests speaking today, both Reverend Jackie Clement and Oliver Malley. So thank you, and welcome to church.
I think how many of the dogs might have barking.
About church. We don't need to come.
People are not long division problems. You cannot, should you meaning well try this, fix or solve them. Remember, they will almost never come out even. What you can do is be a welcome in a wounded and spacious world. You can recognize the person who they are. You can assume that without the gift of their humanity, even when it is a complicated humanity, none of the sum of us can arrive at the answer of who we are meant to be. We need each other if we are to be who we are meant to be, because we are meant to be collective and whole. With these words from the Reverend Theresa and Ninán Soto, I add my own welcome to Karen's. I'm delighted to have everyone here with us in the sanctuary and joining us on YouTube Live or through Zoom. If you are visiting with us for the first time, we extend an especially warm welcome and glad you are here with us today. and hope everyone will join for a time of coffee and conversation following the service. You can follow us out through that door. If you are visiting us on Zoom or on YouTube, there will be a time on Zoom to visit after the service as we gather here for coffee. I invite you at this time to silence your phone, and I just want to say how delighted I am to share the pulpit with Oliver Malley today. I have long enjoyed doing a service with a member of the youth group in the congregation that I served in Illinois, and happy to do so here. And if I didn't say so, and I don't think I did, my name is Jackie Clement.
I am happy to introduce Zachary to light our chalice. As he lights our chalice, I invite you to join in saying our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And I invite you to now sing the opening hymn, number 323, Break Not the Circle. 2 verses only.
I have a quiet voice. Can you hear me? Okay. So this is one of my favorite books, and it's called Red, A Crayon's Story. He was red. That's right. He was red. He's hilarious. But he wasn't very good at it. Oh dear. That's all right. That's okay. I can show you the pictures. I can show you the pictures. He was red, but he wasn't very good at it. Oh dear. His teacher thought he needed more practice. I'll draw a red strawberry, then you draw a red strawberry. You can do this, really. But he couldn't, really. Like this? Oh my, let's try again. His mother thought he needed to mix with other colors. Why don't you two guys go out and draw a nice round orange? A really big one. A really orange one. But they made a big greenish one. Yuck. Oops. His grandparents thought he wasn't warm enough. Your class is making self-portraits for Parents' Night. Wear this warm red scarf. Nice, it's so you. But it so wasn't. Oh, dear me. Do you see him? No. Everyone seemed to have something to say. Sometimes I wonder if he's really read it all. Don't be silly, it says read on his label. He came that way from the factory. Frankly, I don't think he's very bright. Well, I think he's lazy. Right, he's got to press harder. Really apply himself. Give him time, he'll catch on. Of course he will. But he didn't catch on. Green made a green frog, black made a black sheep, brown made a brown cow, and red, oops. Ack. All the art supplies wanted to help. The masking tape thought he was broken inside. This will help hold you together. The scissors thought his label was too tight. One snip should do it. I thought he wasn't sharp enough. Stay still now. But even with all our help and all his hard work, look at that. Everything was blue. He just couldn't get the hang of it. One day he met a new friend. Will you make a blue ocean for my boat? I can't. I'm red. Will you try? So he did. Thank you. It's perfect. You're welcome. It was easy. But he didn't stop there. Bluebells, blue jeans, bluebirds, blueberries, blue whale. I'm blue! And he was blue. And everyone was talking. My son is brilliant. Who could have known he was blue? I always said he was blue. It was obvious. His blue ocean really lifted me. All of his work makes me happy. His blue strawberries are my favorites. He's so intense. I'm going to make a green lizard with him, a really big one. I hear he's working on a huge new project. He's really reaching for the sky. And he really was. Isn't it a beautiful day? It's perfect. And sometimes we are all that crayon. Excuse me, one thing, if parents, if you haven't signed for your child to go across the street to the park, see me before you walk out.
There is peace in the
we are at a point in our service where we will offer our donations and gratitudes to the church. Please feel free to donate as gratefully as you feel comfortable. If you are with us on Zoom, you may go to fculittle.org and there will be a happy little donation button you can press. Or feel free to mail us a check in the mail if you are more comfortable. We accept these donations with joy and appreciation.
Please join me in our words of gratitude. We are grateful for the opportunity to give and serve, and grateful for the gifts we have received. May this affirm the ministries of our church community, both within and beyond these walls.
What is neurodivergency? According to the Oxford Dictionary, neurodivergency is defined as a differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal. But what does this mean? Well, for neurotypical people, the mind works in a certain way, with different parts working together to function and make you process information, help us grow, and overall help us develop as people. But this is the neurotypical mind. However, in the neurodivergent mind, we see that pieces work differently, or in some cases, we have a lot more of these pieces than the typical person, or less. So, for example, in a common mental illness, depression, we see a mix of the brain regulating emotions badly, stressful life events, and even genetic vulnerability. We see, sorry, any and all of these things can cause depression, which can cause a lack of serotonin and makes the haver feel low and struggle regulating their emotions and commonly feel more down than happy most days. So let's dive a little more into what that means to be neurodivergent, because depression isn't the only kind of neurodivergency. What makes you neurodivergent, and how do you know if you're neurodivergent? Well, as stated before, it's simply having a differing mental or neurological functions as the common or neurotypical individual. This includes well-known mental illnesses like depression, OCD, PTSD, anxiety, and many more. This also includes disabilities like autism, personality disorders, schizophrenia, and bipolar personality disorder. It's commonly thought of by people, neurodivergent or not, that the neurodivergent category only applies to well-known things and disabilities like autism, ADHD, and mental disabilities. But in reality, this applies to anyone whose brain works a little different than the normal person. Now, I've just been throwing facts at you, so I'll take a break from that. Sorry. And now I'll get into why I chose to discuss this topic with the congregation today. I personally feel as though the neurodivergent mind has a sort of stigma against it in society, and this is something that's been around for a very long time. But I feel like if we were to talk about it and really process it more together and accept it as a whole, this will make the society really a much better place for neurodivergent people. And we can start by doing that here and talking about these things together. So, sorry. And I feel that it's incredibly important to accept these minds as the neurotypical mind as well, because, well, we want to all be equal, and we can start that by being equal here today. So let's work together to make sure that all minds are appreciated here.
In a few minutes, we're going to sing a song that we sing most weeks, Spirit of Life. However, today we're going to sing it in Spanish. And unlike the times we've done it before, we're not going to line through the words before we sing it. Oliver and I wanted to offer this as an exercise in understanding the experience of neurodivergent ways of thinking. Certainly not of all people, but some. As Oliver just described, there are many types of neurodivergence, and we're not equating speaking a foreign language with any of them, but there are certain analogies that you can draw between a language that you don't speak as a native and certain types of neurodivergence. One is the amount of processing that your brain has to do in order to understand what's going on. Fluent Spanish speakers will see the words printed in the order of service, understand the concepts, form pictures in their minds, and understand what's being said. Others may get there a bit more slowly as we translate through the English words which we sing weekly. Others may not get there at all. Please do not judge yourself or others for where you are on this spectrum. Just try to experience what it feels like. A friend who taught a required German course said the students often complained that they would never use or remember anything from the course. She told them there was one thing they would always remember: what it felt like to be in the midst of human interaction when they couldn't understand what was happening. But before we get to the singing part, let us enter into a time of meditation and prayer. I begin with the words of Dero Farrar based on a short passage from 1 Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Farrar continues, there's something deeply moving for me in that idea of a love that will always have my back. Always, meaning unconditionally and without hesitation. And there's something deeply jarring for me about the idea that despite my most earnest hopes, my best intentions and desires for others may be interrupted in the flow of love from me to them. It's so easy for me when I'm motivated but what I think is my love for someone to decide that I know best what they most need. I'm brought back to memories of growing up in the church of my childhood where love was instructive and constructive, but not necessarily protective. This was especially troubling for me around topics like gender and sexuality, but also vocation and relationship. Is love really love if it fails to support me, to hold me up, or keep me safe? I think about this today in the organizations I serve when we're contemplating major or sometimes painfully minor changes. What would happen if each of us loved the people in our communities in a protective way? What if we loved one another more than we love the buildings that house us, the traditions that have defined us, and even more than our own comfort? Imagine a love that calls us to stretch ourselves so that those whom we love are always guarded from storm, violence, neglect, and need. Does that kind of love bring us into a deeper and truer humility? If not, is our love complete or authentic? Here ends the reading. Please join me in a time of prayer or contemplation of that which is ultimate. That which is in us and all around us, and which constantly draws us to our holiest selves. Bring me into a practice of loving without fail. Strip from me any arrogance or fear that might prioritize my own comfort over the care of others. And help me to be forgiving of myself and others when our expressions of love fall short of the truth. Amen. Blessed be.
I myself am neurodivergent. This makes the topic of neurodiversity really hit home for me. There's a massive stigma and a whole lot of concerns about language and culture and just everything about neurodiversity. In some spaces, it almost feels like if you were to mention being neurodivergent, the neurotypical police would jump out of the walls and arrest you. And this should not be the case. We should feel safe to speak about these really important topics and cultures and all these really important people, really. And it feels like we aren't allowed to, which is just wrong, you know? So why and how do we destroy this stigma about neurodiversity? As said before, being neurodivergent means that your brain functions differently than the typical brain. Also, as said before, there is a stigma about neurodiversity, but why? Why is this stigma? Well, as I'm sure many of you probably know and possibly even have experienced, there's a stigma about being different, really. And luckily, in recent history, this has been really combated, with LGBTQ identities being more represented in cultures and in television, and racism being fought against and more. But what about neurodiversity? It's being combated, yes, but there's a lot of things which have been really severely normalized in our society, which really aren't good, you know? They're really ableist, and it's really common, and a lot of people don't even know that these things have ableist backgrounds or are really ableist, you know? People are taught that there is a norm, and that the norm is, well, the norm, and there's no way to get outside of it. But really there is, and there's so many boxes that you can fit into, and you don't have to be the norm. So in my personal experience, language is a huge part of our culture, and I think most people can agree it's the main form that way people communicate. And there's so many different languages and everything, and there's even nonverbal languages, and it's really the way that we communicate with one another. And it has strength and power, and it has the ability to heal and to also destroy. And something we can do to stop the stigma is to focus on our language. So we can go from saying something is crazy, this thing is insane, man, to instead saying, like, that's different, that's a cool thing, that's new, you know? You can go from saying, like, the R slur to say that someone's stupid, to go and say, you know, you're not making the best decisions, you know? And and we also need to keep in mind that disability is not a slur. Saying that someone's disabled is not saying that someone is less than or someone is less worthy. And surveys actually show that a huge chunk of, for example, autistic people would prefer to have autism be called a disability instead of some super ability or, you know, some strange, cool new thing, you know? So, because it's not, and it is a disability, and people would prefer to have things be called what they are than be tiptoed around and be called, you know, super abilities. But also avoid using harmful languages like slurs and reverting to stereotypes that people stop using stereotypes, basically. Sorry. There's so many different ways that the brain works, and stereotyping it really royally is just not it. There's so many ways that your brain works, and no one's brain is exactly the same as the other person. So we really need to work on not saying that if your brain works a certain way, then you know certain things or you act a certain way, you know? And you can especially focus on saying, don't say that, you know, you don't act blank or you don't look blank. And this is yet again really harmful. This is stereotyping, and you want to avoid saying things like, you don't look autistic, you don't look like you have depression, because people mask and people hide things, and you don't know anyone's story except for your own. And even a lot of the time, you don't really know your own story until you And it takes a lot of deep diving to know your own story. I know this from experience. And always keep in mind that feel free to ask questions. Most of the time, you can ask people, do you prefer to have things be called a disability, or do you prefer to tiptoe around it? You can say, it's just, just like how you can ask someone their pronouns, you can ask people, how would you like me to refer to your neurodivergency or your neurotypicalness, So just keep these things in mind. They're really important. And why is it really important? Well, we want to make people feel comfy cozy. We want people to be happy and to feel comfortable being who they are and what they are, And if we keep hiding these things, and if we keep pretending that these things are super abilities, or we keep saying that, like, oh, let's not talk about depression right now, like, that's not very good, we need to be able to talk about these things in order to be able to grow. And I know most of the people I've talked to about these topics, they are comfortable answering questions, and of course there are people who aren't, but I know there's people in this church who are comfortable if you want to ask them any questions about this, as well as I'm comfortable answering questions if you have any. So always feel free to ask questions, and people make mistakes, so keep that in mind, and what matters is that you grow from them. So you just need to keep these things in mind, and it's really harmful when you don't, because, well, you're hurting people when you use stereotypes, quite frankly, to put it quite blank. So I really appreciate you all listening and putting your time and energy into this. And if you have any questions after the service, you can always feel free to ask me, or Google is always an option as well if you're not comfortable, And I seriously doubt that your little FBI agent is going to be curious about why you're Googling autism. So...
Google's an option, but the order of service will give you some reliable sites to look at, because we all know there's a lot of misinformation out there on Google. When I was a kid, there was no such thing as neurodivergency. Oh, sure, the conditions that are called neurodivergent existed, and as Oliver said, they're a number of different conditions that are listed in the order of service. But they were known by different names when I was a kid. Those outside the experience of a suburban schoolyard generally had different names back then, and those within the school experience were labeled by names that I would not repeat. Even as a child, I knew that the names given to some of the conditions that my classmates struggled with were meant to hurt. You don't have to be extraordinarily gifted or perceptive to know that the schoolyard taunts are meant to cause harm. Even in the world of science, where the conditions of neurodiversity were supposedly studied toward an aim of helping, everything was defined in relation to normal. Neurodiverse conditions weren't diverse or different. They were abnormal and wrong. Change has been slow in coming. As recently as last year, artists like Beyonce and Lozeau were pressured by more enlightened listeners to remove the word spaz from their songs, a word familiar to those who were in schoolyards of my generation, as referring to those who had or demonstrated the actions of cerebral palsy, also known as spastic dysplasia. The irony here is that these artists are known for, if nothing else, empowering messages of being who you are and loving the body that you are in, and yet their songs include words like spaz. Even today, when the term neurodiversity is common, the terms used are still neurodiverse and neurotypical. We're still measured against typical. Sorry to tell you, but we're all neurodiverse. Neurotypical is a pipe dream. The Cleveland Clinic definition of neurodiversity. Neurodivergent is a non-medical term that describes people whose brains work differently for some reason. This means the person has different strengths and struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically. More typically. Not the same, just more typical. If your brain works like anybody else's, please raise your hand. If you have ever been in a close relationship in your life with a parent or a sibling, a spouse, or a friend, you can probably reflect pretty easily on the ways you process information differently. After the last sermon that I offered here, one of the congregation said to me, "You have a good mind." This has always been one of my greatest conceits, that I have a good mind. But it depends on what the measure is. If you mean, do I learn and retain information well, then yes, I have a good mind. If you mean, do I synthesize information well, then yes, I have a good mind. But if you mean, do I analyze and come to conclusions well, then no, I'm sorry, I have a very slow mind. I can do it eventually, but I will need 24 hours to get back to you with a response. I know plenty of people who process and analyze and come to conclusions right in the moment, and they do not understand how my brain works. And while this would not be considered necessarily neurodivergent, we are not all the same. Even if we're considered neurotypical, we are not all the same. And this is a thing that Unitarian Universalism celebrates. We are not all the same. We do not want to be all the same. We see no need to conform to somebody else's idea of what normal or typical is. There is room for more than one individuality. Now, don't take that to mean that we're all great and there is no problem here, that the neurodiverse among us have no need of further thought for their well-being and are embraced simply for their humanity. Because yes and no. Yes, we embrace them simply for their humanity. Yes, we embrace us for our shared humanity. And we need to move outside the concepts of homogeneity and allow those with neurodiverse conditions to tell us what they need in order to thrive here. The UU Ministers Association has been running a series of workshops that Reverend Laura, Thea, and I have attended. They've talked about some specific things that we can design into church life, but there's also some simple things that every single one of us can do to help realize the beloved community for all. The three things which each of us can do are: number one, listen. Listen to who people are and what they need. Respect that. 2, Move beyond expectations. Don't make assumptions about someone's capabilities or desires based on a diagnosis. Don't place limits on what they can contribute or achieve. Invite participation, don't block it. And number 3, offer what is needed for all to thrive, not accommodations that make somebody else fit into a predefined norm. There are more tips than those 3 in your order of service, but those are 3 good overarching principles for getting along with pretty much anybody. Listen, don't make assumptions, honor people for who they are. This is what it means to build the beloved community. It doesn't mean to build a community we love or where we are loved. It means to build a community where all are loved. It means to build that community where love acts as fierce protection, not love that is merely instructive and constructive, but protective. This is not about being a community that will attract and welcome those who are neurodiverse. People living with neurodiverse conditions are already here and have been all along. This is their church as much as anyone's. So we will not pretend to be the neurotypical making room for the neurodiverse, but rather recognizing that it's all of us together. Striving to be a community that loves and protects the uniqueness of every person, that honors the worth and dignity of every being. May we be that community. We have for centuries striven for theological diversity. It's in our denominational DNA. We take pride in being a leading voice for racial, multicultural, and LGBTQ diversity. Let us now use that protective love in service of wider inclusion. Let us make the circle wider still. Blessed be. Namaste. Our closing hymn is number 1018 in the teal hymnal, Come and Go With Me. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together.
must be as yourself, unadulterated, shedding the willingness to journey alone as though you are made of something hard and unforgivable. You are human, you belong, right here, right now, and together we will chase away the sickness, the secrets, and leave only the open possibility that the future is a space for growth. Blessed be and amen.